So hey everybody, welcome to a Brilliant Businesses podcast. My name is Nick Bryant and I'm here today in the Loch Associates offices with Pam Loch. Hi Pam.
Hi there.
Good to see you again. So this is a series of podcasts actually, and we're on the second one, and today we're going to be talking about the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case, and there's a lot of information coming out about that with private information, so we're going to relate that to the world of business. And Pam's going to tell us a bit about that. So tell us a bit about that, Pam.
Sure, it might sound a bit odd, but
Yeah.
bear with me, because there's a connection here. Because obviously, if you've been watching Amber Heard and Johnny Depp, you'll have heard the evidence that we've heard so far from Johnny Depp, and you'll have seen or been aware of the text messages that have been exchanged, and obviously some of them are quite shocking in the content.
Yeah.
And the other thing is really the extent to which we're hearing all this private information. Now, obviously, they're in a relationship, but at work, we're also in a relationship.
Yeah.
And, you know, your employer obviously wants to make sure that you don't do anything that's going to potentially damage that relationship. So, you know, one of the things that we've also noticed is the increase in the number of clients that want to monitor emails and access information. So, I mean, you know, obviously Johnny Depp and Amber Heard are in a courtroom.
Yeah.
And they're under an obligation to disclose documents. And then that's how it sort of links into business, because like, you know, Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, you might end up in a dispute with one of your employees or with someone else. And so often you might forget actually what you put in writing some time ago may come back to bite you.
Yes.
Which is certainly probably the case with Johnny Depp and Amber Heard.
Yes.
So it's important to remember that, you know, whatever you put in writing is there, it's on the record. But also, aside from it ending up in a court or a tribunal process, there's also law around this. So you've got the Data Protection Act, which enables individuals to make data subject access requests.
Right.
And if you get one of those as an employer, you've got a month to respond to them. If it's complex, and it has to be really complex, you might be able to extend it by 2 months.
Okay.
But it means that you're then under an obligation to make a search through all your documents, but also release any WhatsApp messages or text messages where it contains personal information.
Yeah.
And that's got to be released to the person that made the request. Now, obviously, this is where you need to get expert advice, you know, from somebody like us at Loch Associates, just to make sure, A, that you're doing it correctly, and B, there might be certain correspondence you don't need to release because there's certain exemptions. So it's important not to put that in the bin or to ignore it, which we have had some clients that have contacted us after they've done that and then realised they're in trouble.
Yeah.
So don't do that,
No.
but also, you know, make sure that you get advice. So there's that aspect that we need to keep in mind.
You mentioned about the data detox, really,
Yeah.
to look at it that way, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's important to remember that you only need to release what's in your possession. And so, you know, it's also got to be something that you can search and find. But it's important, therefore, just to make sure that you only keep relevant information. So, you know, for example, you shouldn't be keeping CVs for people that you've interviewed months and months ago unless you've got their permission to keep it.
Yeah.
So you can get rid of information. Now, you know, I've seen clients get caught out here where they've had a CV, they've put some comments on it, didn't bother to sort of delete it when they didn't, decide to recruit the person. And then the person comes back and says, oh, here's a data subject access request. I'd like to see my personal information. And of course...
And they've got every right to do that.
Absolutely. And of course, the person that you've then got it in your possession, you've retained it, when actually, why did you do that? Because it wasn't really something that you should be retaining anyway. So it's important to do these data detoxes, get rid of stuff that's no longer relevant, because you shouldn't really be retaining it anyway.
Yeah. And you mentioned the screening checks as well as part of it.
I mean, we definitely noticed an increase in clients that are doing more screening checks, and that's because they want to be careful about who they're recruiting. And there's been another story in the news recently involving the Met Police, because they've been looking at, and again it links into messages as well, they want to make sure that they don't recruit people that could turn out to be rapists.
Sure, yeah.
And so what they're now looking at is how can we screen those individuals. Now, quite a lot of employers do screening checks at the beginning of employment because they want to make sure that the person has got nothing in the background that's going to cause a problem. Now, some of that is compulsory.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to do DBS checks if you're involved in roles that might relate to children or vulnerable people. So there might be requirements by law that you've got to do the screening checks, but quite a few employers are now extending that. So we're doing quite a lot of screening for clients that there's not a particular reason to do it. They just want to check the person's background. And so what the Met Police have done is they're going a step further, because they're now talking about screening all the way through the relationship, which a lot of employers don't do. There's only about 11% of employers who do initial screening checks who actually do refreshers effectively and keep on checking up, because obviously you might be with an employer for a while, things might happen,
absolutely,
while
things
you're
change.
employed, but nobody's really keeping on top of that. So it's something that employers need to look at. The Met Police, as I say, are going to step even further, and they're now talking about introducing what they refer to as advanced technology to basically spot any inappropriate language or words that should cause alarm bells to ring. So in effect, doing a constant screening of what their employees or the police officers are doing. Now, the interesting thing is they haven't so far said it's just on their equipment. There seems to be a suggestion from what Dame Cressida Dick said in February that they would do spot random checks. Is that going to be on private phones? So this could change the dynamics. I mean, I'm not sure if other employers would want to go as far as that, but it just shows you the sort of the benefits or the use that can come from technology nowadays that some employers are taking advantage of.
So is it like the Met are going to be setting a standard for that now, so that other employers are going to follow the route with that? Because if they're doing it, they think they an employer should be doing it as well.
Well, it may well. I think
and
that
the fine line of crossing people's personal stuff.
I mean, I think there will be some organisations that perhaps supply services to the Met, where the Met might say, well, we actually want you to do this because we're doing this, and then we think this is the way that we can make sure that we're not getting people that are working with us that are not appropriate. So they might do that. Other employers might say, well, we think it's appropriate because they are doing it. You might well get that. But you're right. There's a fine line, and one of the issues around the difference between the police and other private organisations is it's likely that the Human Rights Act could apply directly, whereas with private companies it's different. So there'd be an issue here around an invasion of privacy. Is there an issue there? So I think there's a number of things that have got to get teased out. But as a normal employer that's not the police, I think you have to also think about, do you want to go that step and starting overstepping the mark and maybe looking into people's private lives to that extent? If it doesn't really impact on their ability to do an office job, why do you need to know things that they're doing in their private life? Because the police are talking about, if you are somebody who has affairs, then there's a big question mark over your integrity. And there's again a question there about, well, why did you have an affair? Because there could be explanations as to why you had an affair that mean that it's not a question around your integrity. So there's a lot of issues there to be teased out, I think.
Can an employer just do that anyway, or if they've got to set that in the contract when they employ someone, that they're allowed to check their private stuff, or are they allowed to do that anyway?
I would say no.
Okay.
I don't think you should be monitoring to that extent, but you should have a clause in your contract which says we will, basically any emails that you send are business emails, and we will be monitoring the emails. And effectively, by you signing the contract, you're giving consent to them accessing other emails that contain private information.
And then there was the whether they're going to be checking their personal devices as well as their workforce devices as well. But that goes back to what you were just saying, isn't it?
I think the challenge here is that so many people use their phones for multi-purposes. And a lot of employers, like we do, we will say, well, actually, this is your work phone, that's for work, and that's your personal phone. And actually, I think it helps people manage their lives better. I mean, I know you've got two phones and there's a bigger risk you might lose one. But, I think it then divides it up. And I think there should be a division between your private life and your home life, your work life. But there are some jobs where it may be necessary, because it's high security. They may feel that they need an agreement that actually we're allowed to randomly check your private phone messages.
And then we were talking earlier about them also doing drug and alcohol testing for access checks for those sort of things as well.
I mean, again, we've noticed an increase in this. We've got employers that are saying to us, can you do some drug and alcohol testing? Now, again, you've got to be careful because you need to make sure that you've got employees have agreed that you can test them. So it's not just a case of suddenly one morning waking up and saying we're going to do this, but we can certainly help you sort that out. It's not difficult to sort out. But I also think it might be something that, again, private companies want to be thinking about doing to help their staff as well, because we've seen recent research that supports a concern that we had, not because it's going on in our business, but we've become aware of a sort of a growing trend that employees were drinking at home while they were furloughed or rather working from home. might even been while they were furloughed.
Yeah.
And actually, what they've established is 9 out of 10 people who were working from home in 2021 were drinking while they were working at home.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And it wasn't just a couple of glasses. It was often a bottle of wine during the day.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not saying we didn't used to drink before, but you used to come back to work. Whereas I think it's easy when you were at work, if you had a couple of glasses of wine at home, you might just continue to drink. So the question is, have you got staff that have come back to work that might have a problem that you might need to support them with to try and help them?
Yeah.
And I mean, at the moment, it's still incredibly difficult to recruit good staff. So if you've got somebody that's got a problem with their alcohol intake, then, it makes a lot of sense to try and help them, get better, get over that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I just wonder whether there are, problems out there that actually a lot of employers maybe never thought existed and could explain a lot when somebody's coming to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or indeed, if they're still at home and they're sounding a little bit more sort of slurry in the afternoon, is it because they've been drinking, over the course of lunchtime?
So many people are working from home right now, aren't they? So it's not inevitable, of course it isn't. But a lot when you're at home and you're comfortable, you might reach for this and reach for that. But obviously, you can advise businesses on how to approach that and talk to their staff about that and help them with it. Really, that's what it's about. Really, the support, isn't it?
Yeah, we've got HR consultants that work as part of the group, and they're often, get involved, trying to ascertain initially what the issue could be.
Yeah.
But I think it's just raising awareness, because I think a lot of companies, a lot of employers might not be thinking that their staff are drinking at home, because it's easy to put something into a mug that may appear to be coffee, but it's not. Yeah. And, it's difficult to then spot it when you're not actually face to face with the individual either.
Yeah.
So I think there's that. The other thing that I think we're noticing an increase in is also people that are taking drugs and driving.
All right.
And the police have reported recently quite a significant increase in convictions for people that are drug driving. Right. And they've now obviously got the equipment that they can do that, and they can stop you and test you. And again, that's something else is worth looking at, is what are your current policies on drugs and alcohol at work? Have you got a policy? Do staff know what the expectations are? Because especially if you've got a job where somebody's driving, because usually it's the morning after, the night before as usual.
Yes.
That somebody gets stopped. But I think there's a lot of things that we probably need to revisit now, but also maybe take a different view given the impact of COVID.
Yeah, there are things that I'm sure a lot of employers hadn't even thought of. So it's really good that you've pointed them out. It's a really interesting topic, isn't it? Actually, the whole lot of it, with data access, GDPR, what you can and what you can't do, who can access your data and who can't. But really important in the business world. So I'm sure there's a little more we can cover, but is there anything else we can cover on that, Pam? Or we've got that across, haven't we? Yeah. So thank you for getting on the podcast again today. Another great podcast. A lot of information there. If you need any help from Pam, all her details are on the Brilliant Businesses website. If you like what we're doing, please subscribe, and we'll see you for another podcast soon. Thank you very much.